Good afternoon, everybody. How lovely to have you with us on this beautiful sunny Wellington day. We're not sure where you're coming from, but we are very happy to be coming to you, wherever that is. We are joined by the fabulous Alicia Mackay, who's doing an Ask Me Anything session today, and she's going to be sharing a whole bunch of her insights on her background in strategy and how to create influence. And can you give us a bit of background on where you've come from and what gives you this unique insight that you have?
I have been talking shit for a living my entire career, and I've been doing that in a room full of others, ever since I started real work, really. So I started my career as a baby policy analyst at a little council in the South Island of New Zealand, and my very first project was to facilitate the development of a strategy with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. So we were doing a biodiversity action plan, and as a freshly minted 22-year-old grad, my job was to get a room together of local and regional councils, central government, farmers, environmental activists, local people, and get them all figuring out a way forward. So it really set the scene, I guess, for what I was going to spend my time doing in my career. So I started there, and the very first training course I ever did was Facilitating for Results with Rob Handyside. Hi, Rob, if you're watching. It was a great course. It really set me up. And then I've been consulting for the last maybe 6 or 8 years, and in that time have just facilitated so many different meetings and workshops with politicians, senior leaders, frontline staff. I've done everything from, I spent some time about 5 or 6 years ago doing a lot of business case development, so a lot of workshops around how are we going to spend our money. I've done a lot of long-term planning and strategic planning stuff. What's our organisational strategy? What's our long-term plan for the next 10 years? All the way down to what are we doing internally, and how do we make more money or spend less? So I have been doing this. Well, you've been watching me through lockdown, Cam.
I have. I've had the experience of being with Alicia through the lockdown in New Zealand. I'm from Australia, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I came here to do 5 days of work about 3 months ago, and we decided that I would stay. So I've been here watching Alicia transform her practice to nearly completely online for the last 2 months. And now as we ease back out of lockdown, moving back into actual workshops, one thing I wanted to ask, and I'm interested in your thoughts on, is a lot of the time strategy and facilitation can be maybe an invisible skill. Facilitation can be a bit of an invisible skill. So having had the journey you've had, what's been the biggest surprise? What would have surprised younger you the most about where you are now?
That it's actually less about the person who's facilitating and more about the people in the room. But really, I mean that. And I think we get really hung up when we have to lead these conversations, whether we're a facilitator or a baby policy analyst, all the way through to whether we're a chief executive or a consultant. And it's actually really nerve-wracking for people to stand up in front of a room of experts and to help them make decisions. And it's really easy to get tangled in your own shit and worried about what you're saying and thinking and what people think of you. And the reality is that, for the most part, really good facilitation, like most things done really well, is invisible. People don't notice it. They remember how they felt. They remember the decisions they made. They feel really committed to the people that they were talking to and the things that they decided on, but they're not going to remember you. And so I often tell politicians that it's hard to do their job because if they're doing it well, they don't get positive recognition. So the only reason that they're getting nothing but negative feedback is because all the good stuff they're doing is taken for granted, which is the sign of public services done well. And I think it's the same internally. If you're a great boss and it's a great place to work, still the ratio of negative to positive feedback is going to be off, because if you're doing your job well, your bit is invisible and it's the outcomes that everybody is focused on. I think what's been interesting, so you might have noticed, I see Louise focusing on my sling, is that I've injured my shoulder in my right arm, and I'm a facilitator. And so I haven't been able to flip chart or whiteboard for the last couple of weeks. And Cam has been my handy sidekick who has been filling in as we go on my instruction what needs to go on the flip chart.
And my insight from it is that it's not as easy as it looks. And so, as we've just heard, facilitation can be an invisible process, and I'm here to say that I agree. So having to listen to Alicia's thoughts, gathering thoughts from the audience, translating that into simple words that can be written quickly on a flip chart, distilling the right message, focusing in the right spot. I wasn't even doing that. I was just the pen, and I found it hard.
And that's the stuff you can see. And so what a good facilitator has done is done most of their work outside of the room. And then in the room, they're busy thinking not only about what people are saying and what they're thinking, but what's driving that? What good question is coming next? How can you sum that up in a way that's useful? Where do you need to take the conversation from here? How engaged are people? What level of tension is there in the room? And doing all of that while being really focused on what the big outcome is at the end of it all, which is the decision you need to make or the landing point that you need to land on. And so if you've ever suffered through a shit facilitator and wondered why they're not doing a good job, it's bloody hard work.
And I've just popped up this comment from Kirsty, who's written that the worst thing is a facilitator giving their opinion and dominating the room. So how do you advise people to get the right balance between keeping everything on course, but keeping your focus in the right spot so that it's not your opinion, you're just hosting it well?
Yeah, that's right. And so that's about making it about the ideas, not about the people, isn't it? So I totally agree with you, Kirsty. Having somebody just dominate, whether that's the facilitator or just one or two of the participants in a workshop, just sucks. But equally, I actually think it's really important that as a facilitator, you're not afraid to challenge or to provide direction or to put in some expert input. So I think when I first learned to facilitate, I was under this impression that I had to be very objective all the time and that I couldn't have a particular say in the way things went. And I think the more I've done this over the years, I've been clear that, hey, actually, they've got me in the room because they want access to what I know, and that it's okay to do that, but it's not in a way where you've got an opinion. It's in a way where you're going, hey, look, I see this happen a lot, or are you sure about that? And challenging those assumptions. So again, it's facilitator as host, not as participant.
Yeah, a really good friend, Digby Scott, who's done a whole bunch of facilitation too.
Hi, Digby.
Who Alicia and Digby do a podcast talking about a whole bunch of this sort of stuff and more. You should get on that. What's on your mind? Digby talks about being the Graham Norton. That's his definition of when he's doing his facilitation well. So it's got his personality. It's got Graham Norton's stamp on his show, but he doesn't do a lot of the talking. All he does is, well, not all he does. What he does is provide a great environment for the people who he's hosting to shine.
All right, team. Well, this is an Ask Me Anything. And so we've got a whole stack of questions that you've all sent in ahead of this. And we would love to have your questions flowing in as we go. So if you've got something that you want to ask, please feel free to chuck that in the comments while you're watching, and we will get to everything we can. And in the interim, I think you've got a whole stack sitting in front of you.
We do have a stack of questions sitting here. So for anyone who's joined us recently, welcome to the Ask Me Anything. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's just to say hi, where you're coming from, or just what's on your mind. We'd love to get as much input from you guys as we can. And feel free to pop that in the chat whenever you like. First question is, why are senior leaders so focused on buying new tools, like software to improve productivity, but don't acknowledge the bigger picture stuff?
Yeah, right. So this is a thing. And when I was doing business case stuff and investment logic stuff a number of years ago, what was really common would be, Alicia, we need a business case for this new thing that we're going to buy. So could you come and run the workshops for us, please? And I find that one really interesting because clearly we've come in with a solution and we're trying to retrofit the conversation to fit it. And that's actually it's not so awful. It's not a failing. It shows that you've got a real desire to solve a problem. But what is problematic is when we've leapt to the solution, and when the solution is a tool or something you can buy. So when we think about business change, what we want to be able to do is focus on the problems we're solving and the change we want to create. And the last thing that we think about is what we might need to buy to make that happen. So, it's, we really need to improve our relationships with our customers. I'd like to buy a CRM. We've got to have a business case for the CRM. And actually it's about going, hold on. Let's park that for a second. If that's the answer, hey, we are totally going to get there. But in the interim, let's zoom out and have a conversation about why this is a problem in the first place. What's driving that? So what? What are the impacts that we're seeing that we would like to be able to do something about? What are the people components? of our business change that we need to make sure we don't neglect. And whether that's the people that are working for us or the people that we're trying to reach, what are they thinking and feeling? What's motivating them? How can we change the way we work to make it possible to achieve whatever it is the outcome that we're looking for, whether that's better relationships with our customers or lower costs or better productivity. And then we'll talk about what that looks like. And actually, I can think of a job that I did maybe 7 years ago. Anyway, for an energy company in Taranaki. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to equip all of their staff with tablets so that they could do mobile inspections of all of their sites, of all their little oily sites. They get the oil from it. Like, you don't have to be a content expert to be a facilitator. And they got me in to run these business case workshops so they could buy this mobile technology. And what we had to do in the end was, we had to make it a bit of fun. I had to park it. I said, I'm banning the word tablet, and I'm banning the word, whatever the name of the software was. We are not allowed to use those words for the next 2 workshops, because if that's the answer, we will get there. But you are currently focusing on the specs of the tablet you might buy, not about the business problems you're solving, which were around safety and mobility and efficiency. And so I actually banned the word so we couldn't do the solution. And sometimes you've got to do that.
Well, the phrase that I've heard you say a few times that you love is when in doubt, zoom out.
Oh, when in doubt, zoom out.
And that's a great example of that. Like, we've got this solution and it's this size and we should focus on it. That's not where the focus should be.
No, all the way back. But why? Yeah, but why? So I like, if you've got to ask a minimum of 3 and a target of 5 whys for every question.
All right, we've got a question live coming in now from Adele, who's asking how to deal with reluctant participants when the strategy you're proposing means change for people.
Yeah, so I reckon there's 2 questions in there, Adele. So the first one is about reluctant participants, right? So that's about, how do you engage people and get them on board? How do you speak to them and create an environment where actually these are problems that are worth solving for them and that they feel as though they've got some ownership of and a real opportunity to have input to? And I think I've probably answered the question and framing it there, which is really about, you've got to connect with people. You've got to connect them to your problem. And it's got to be about a shared idea, right? And that's really important. And I think what's funny about workshops, and every workshop I run, I have somebody walk in and give me the look, right? Like, all right, here we go, another one of these.
Who's this young upstart?
And they sit down and the body language is really clear, right? So they might sit back like this, they fold their arms, they put their legs up on a chair, and I can see the challenge in their face, like, all right, lady, what are we doing this for? And what I can tell you is that person always becomes my goal for the meeting. And if you can convert the reluctant, the cynic, the detractor, that person will in all likelihood become your biggest supporter. And if they are reluctant, it's probably for a really good reason. So it's either because they have been burned in the past by having input to something that's gone nowhere, or because there are real holes in the idea that you're having or the solution you're talking about, or because there's something you've missed. So speak to that person, figure out what's driving them, and tailor your process to fit it, because it will improve the quality of your decision making. And if you get them on board, you will have your biggest fan. So that was one. But
I've got a question about that while we're still on it. So my background's in video production, so that's where this question's coming from. When you want to make interesting content and connect with people, you don't ask them about the thing they know. You ask them how they feel. And if you can get someone to have an emotional reaction to something you're asking rather than a knowledge reaction, you get much better buy-in. How does that translate to your environment?
Well, that's about kind of asking people to set the tone for you. So you can stand up at the start of a workshop or a meeting and go, everybody, it's very important that we talk about our 5-year plan. And it's very important because things are shifting and you guys aren't working hard enough and we're going to all be made redundant if we don't sort it out and blah, blah, blah. Right, so you can frame it up. Sure, that's one thing. Or you can stand up at the start of your workshop and go, oh, why do you think this matters? Yeah, right. Hey, what's keeping you awake at night? Oh, yeah, that's hard. What's some of the stuff that's worrying you? What's exciting you? And oh, yeah, right. Have them create the scene for you. They'll tell you why it matters. And when someone has spent 15 minutes convincing you why this matters, it's hard for them to think that it doesn't.
Brilliant.
Oh, and the second part of that question, Adele, my apologies, was about when it means change for them, and that's nerve-wracking. And we really underrate people on this. People are not afraid of change. We are evolutionary animals. We seek, thrive, and love change. What we don't like is uncertainty, and what we don't like is the possibility of personal loss. But if we're working on grappling through uncertainty together, we've acknowledged it, we've created all the certainty we can by saying, here's what is changing and here's what's not, and we're able to actually tailor our process in a way that addresses some of those fears and concerns, then I think people feel a whole lot better. But people are not afraid of change. And I'm sick of hearing that. We love it, man.
Just has to be the change I want.
Well, what happens quite a lot is I'll go through a process with an exec team, and they'll go, oh, but our middle tier, like, you're going to have to be really careful how we talk about this with them, because they've got a lot of change fatigue. They're all feeling very nervous. They're burned from the last restructure. They don't really want to step up. And then I go and run some consultation or some workshops with their middle tier, and the middle tier, almost without fail, say, oh, thank God for that. We just want to get on and do it. We need them to get out of our way. We want this to change. So there is a disconnect there.
And it's probably worth popping this comment up too from Kirsty, just saying get the undiscussables out of the way early.
Oh, the elephants. I love to call for an elephant. You get bonus points if you get an elephant in the first 10 minutes. And that is actually, I love that, Kirsty, because it is just about making it obvious and making it visible and just going, oh, it's a bit dumb, isn't it? Like, we just had 2 restructures and now we're talking about organisational change again. God, you guys must be pissed off with this.
Okay, so we're in the middle of the Ask Me Anything. For anyone who's joined us recently, we're definitely welcoming more questions. So if you've got a hello from wherever you are or a question you'd like to ask expert facilitator and strategy queen Alicia, please pop it in the comments. Another question from the earlier form and the call for questions. Where are people right now in their planning for the future? Is it happening now? And if not, when? From Anon.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird time, isn't it? So Cam has watched this over the last few months, the process that we've gone through with these teams of, everything just turned to shit. We need extra support. What do we do? And I guess my short answer to that question would be yes, we are definitely thinking about the future, and we being just the leadership teams and the exec teams that I'm working with, we're definitely thinking about the future. But I think that it's more uncertain. So there's a lot more uncertainty and externality than there usually is in these conversations. And the second one is that our timeframes are really compressed. So I think what COVID did with the fast turnaround and the fast change, oh, we're in lockdown, oh, we're in a different level, oh, this is happening now, is it compressed the amount of time that we're able to plan for and how far we can look ahead with any kind of confidence. And so I think what we are doing is a couple of things. One of them is that we're examining a lot of underlying assumptions about the way we do business and what people need. And that means that we are asking bigger questions, not just could everyone work from home now? Do we need an office? But actually, is this the right model for us to make money or for us to serve our customers over the next 5 or 10 years? And what that high level of uncertainty does is it means that our plans look a bit different. So we have to do a lot more experimentation, and it takes longer to land on something. And that's not a problem. So strategy is not about creating concrete plans and then sticking with them. It's about noticing when things change and being able to experiment with some new versions of reality before we land on something. So those conversations are happening, and we're having some bigger picture stuff really about, God, what do we actually want?
Well, that's one of the things that came up quite a bit in the lockdown was new ways of working, which just turned into, just working the same way on Zoom.
That was it, wasn't it? New ways of working. Your 10 meetings a day, you now no longer have to walk between or get a pee break between. You just click your mouse. So, yeah, it is happening, but it is different. It's compressed and it's a bit wobbly, and there's a lot more experimentation happening with those who are doing it well.
Okay, so we've got another question that's come in asking about how you deal with conflict. So say you're in a meeting with a diverse range of opinions and people from different departments, and they've all got vocal viewpoints. How do you deal with that kind of conflict? What's your facilitator tip set for
Is this Sue's question? Hi, Sue.
Yeah, from Sue Danner.
I hope you're watching. So great question. And first of all, how lucky are you to already be in a room where you've got diversity of perspective? Because getting that in the first place is a really important part of setting up for a workshop, right? So have we got everybody's voices represented? Is everyone being heard? How can we encourage people to stop being polite and nodding and actually say what they think? So if you've got that conflict, that is a tremendous asset. That's great. The job of a facilitator is to ignite a controlled burn. So your job is to orchestrate productive conflict. And that means a couple of things. One is about taking the personal out of it. So making it really safe to have conflict about ideas and positions. So sometimes that's actually as simple as I like to run a debate. You've watched me run a debate. The debates are so much fun.
Well, it gives so much freedom to someone who wants to say something but doesn't want it to represent themselves.
Yeah. So
you can just throw grenades when you do that.
You can make it really ridiculous, right? You can throw a really obscene moot up on the board that represents the extreme end of a position and have people take the affirmative and negative for that. There's a lot of hilarity, but also it's really productive. Because
what I've heard it do when Alicia's run this really well is it gives people the chance to pretend to be someone else. So, and that's another strategy Alicia uses too, which I've seen, which is she'll ask people to put themselves in the shoes of another stakeholder or an interested party or someone connected to the situation and just ask them what they would say and think and feel. And by removing the personality from it, it makes the conflict easier to address.
Yeah. So what we're trading in here, we've got a room full of people, but actually what we're trading in is ideas. So what we need to do is suck as much of the personal out of it as possible so that we can talk about ideas. So the debates are great. The In Another Shoes game is so much fun, particularly if you have to be arguing from the perspective of someone who's very different to you. So I've had a regional councillor who is a prolific local farmer arguing from the perspective of Forest and Bird or Greenpeace, for example. Or I've had a stick to your knitting core services type councillor arguing from the perspective of a young upstart who is a lefty and thinks we should only be providing social housing, or, so that's really fun, but it's also really useful. And I think the other one, so you said before, one of my lines, which is when in doubt, zoom out, is being able to, again, trade in ideas and zoom out and go, yeah, so what's all this about? I'm hearing, right. And so what the facilitator does is they find the links. So you find the points of agreement and go, hey, this is funny. Like, we're all coming from different angles, but all I can hear is you guys furiously agreeing that we really need to do something about the culture in this place. And everyone goes, yeah, that is what we're saying. And you go, cool. So actually all we're trying to figure out is what angle we solve that from. And all right, so let's work out what the big problem is here. Yep, you've got that sorted. What's the outcome? Like, what does it look like if we fix this? Oh, yeah, right. And that matters to everyone, doesn't it? God, I can tell how much that matters to you. That's brilliant. So let's work out which of those things are most important right now. And then just a really safe way for us to wait or agree which of those things are the most important to focus on. And again, it's sucking all the personal out of it. It's not because you're from HR. It's not because you're from outside. It's because there's an idea that we're all looking at together. We all feel like it matters, and we're just figuring out which bits to tackle.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a question here from Pete Seligman, who's asking a question around businesses can make a whole bunch of money without thinking about strategy at all. How do you convince someone in that position that it's a good idea to think about strategy? I'm paraphrasing that question, Pete, but I hopefully got the gist of it.
I hope you're watching, Pete, and I hope you're enjoying Queenstown and that it is a nice, warm, lovely day down there, and that you've been convinced that New Zealand is in every possible way superior to Australia.
He's also an Australian who's come over here for lockdown.
Yeah, so I actually think the question you're asking is great, Pete, and it speaks to a real misconception about what strategy is. So I think we confuse strategy with a plan, and it feels confining, or it feels academic, or it feels theoretical. And really my question for anybody that owns a business is, don't you want to do the best stuff and make the most money? And if you do, well, like, there are no shortage of good ideas, right? You are not short on good ideas or potential things that you can do, but you've only got so much. You've only got so much energy and time and bandwidth and resource, yeah? And strategy is all about allocating that really limited band that you've got to where it's going to have the most impact. And unless you have a good conversation about where you're trying to head and what you should be focusing on, it doesn't happen by accident. So, yep, you might do great, you might make money, lots of people do. Agility is important, but unless you've got clarity and agreement about what the most important stuff you need to do is and the best way you think you can get there, there's no way of guaranteeing that you're not going to just dilute your effort. And anybody who's trading in their own money knows we'd rather not do that.
And it's worth pointing out too that Nick Reamer, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, posted this comment ages ago, but it's been relevant 4 times. So I've just kept popping on that comment because it's a really good lens. And what I think is a good question, and I'd love for you to share your philosophy on this. Sometimes people think focusing on making money isn't a admirable goal.
Yeah.
Can you talk quickly about that?
Oh, that's quite deep for an Ask Me Anything on
strategy. It wasn't Ask Me Anything. It wasn't on the list, but okay, I think it's a good question.
Fine, it was an Ask Me Anything. So I think I work a lot with government and with community organisations, and there is a perception that making money is mutually exclusive with doing good. Yeah, so it's the doing well, doing good dichotomy. And I think, first of all, anyone who's driven purely by profit, so if the only thing you're trying to do is create money, then you're on a hiding to nothing because you can't engage people in that. You're not going to care about it every day. If that's all you really care about, get into crime. So I think, well, no, really. And so clarity about what your impact is really important, whether you're in government or whether you're in business. So what is the change that you're trying to create in the world? And that's the externally focused lens, and that needs to drive your strategy because that's going to get you out of bed. If you just want to make more money, rob people, deal some drugs, I don't know. But having said all of that, our good friend Lisa O'Neill often describes money as life lube. And I think that lube analogy applies organisationally and in business and in government as well, where actually we need to be able to have resources to do great stuff, right? It doesn't happen by accident. And that's why we're seeing social enterprise, we're seeing user pays model for NGOs, we're seeing B Corps, because we've realised that actually neither thing is inherently superior, and that money isn't about greed, it's about what we're using it for and what the impact we're trying to have is. And so it's okay to be profitable and good. In fact, why wouldn't you want to be?
And I love too that if someone's willing to spend money on it, it means it's a good idea.
Oh, totally.
It's a great filter for working out, is my idea landing? If someone's willing to pay for it, it must be a good idea. Or at least it's got value to the person I'm selling it to. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left, so let's just race through a couple of final questions.
Okay.
How would you go about shifting a large ELT, 14 people, from representing their area's work program to the bigger picture?
Yeah, 5 best practice business units does not an effective organisation make, Anna. Oh my God, I see this one a lot. Hey, this one makes so much sense. So what we do is we set up structures where we reward people for the performance of their bit. We reward them financially and with status for the performance and expertise of their specific functional area. Their financial metrics are based on that. Their individual performance is based on that. Their job description is about the teams they're leading and the stuff they're doing. And then we go, hey, it's weird that everybody's not tapped into the big picture, isn't it? Honestly. So there's a couple of things in there. And one of them is, if you are on an executive team, your team are your fellow executives, right? That your peers are your team. The people you manage are another question, but that's your team. And building that culture is super important. But the second one is, if you would like that behavior, maybe we should incentivize it. And so actually making sure that we've set our systems up in a way that reward big picture collaborative thinking rather than incentivize people to be delivering best stuff that doesn't actually, this is the sum is less than its parts problem, right? And I think there's a lot we can do to actually change the way we systemize that, the way we incentivize it.
Brilliant. Now we've got a question here from Sue Hope. And
Sue.
we don't have time to get to this question, but I think on your website, if you Google $100 game, you'll find a great tool to get people to focus on the big rocks.
Yeah.
What I think we should use our last minute for is a question relating to something that came up in some earlier sessions that people might have heard you talking about, which is that you had your first walkout from a workshop.
We're going to go straight to the walk. We had all these great questions to answer, and we're going to talk about the walkout.
People want to know this. People walked out. What happened? Give us the quick rundown of what happened.
Okay.
And would you do anything differently?
Okay. So for the first time in my career, and I'd like to say it's the only time, and I can't guarantee that, not really. I'm a bit cheeky. I did have a group of politicians and senior leaders who were booked for 2 days of workshops, and after the first day, they did not come back. And so that happened over lockdown, and it is certainly the first time it's happened. And there's been a couple of people I spoke to where I went, oh, I finally had a group walk out on me, and they went, well, it's probably about time. So what happened there, I think, was we were trying to have really important, really challenging conversations in an environment that was really hard. So when it comes to setting up conversations like this, mood and context and timing is so, so important. And we were operating in an environment where things were really uncertain and they were really hard. And that doesn't mean you don't have those conversations, but it does mean you need to be quite careful about creating a safe space. Now, this was, maybe the first few weeks that we'd been doing the online workshops. And clearly there's a challenge in creating an environment of psychological safety and team connection when you're doing it online. And that's particularly true when you're facilitating a group that aren't super literate with using the online stuff. So there was that. But to be fair, I was lifting up a lot of rocks, and I was poking and really challenging some deeply held assumptions about how their job or what their job is and how they should carry it out, and about what they might be looking for in the future. And we were doing that at a time when feelings were running really high. So what would I do differently? I think much like the elephant chat we had before, Kirsty, about making things visible, if there is tension in a room and you can sense it, because you just can sense that people are getting upset, I think it's really important to make that visible and call it out, but not in a personal way, like, hey, John, looks like you're having a bit of a tough time, mate. We're pissing you off. But more as though, God, there's a bit of a tension here about whether that's true, isn't it? We're really, there's a couple of different competing ideas here about what your job looks like. And here's idea one, and here's idea two. And isn't that interesting? And let's be aware of that, because it would be easy for us to get sucked into A. And what we want to do is stay focused on the big picture. So let's make sure that if we are feeling pissed off, we're acknowledging that and actually just working with it. And like, I knew they were upset, but I was like, no, they'll be right. Turns out they weren't. So next time I think I'd call that out.
Oh, how lovely to have these great answers and good questions from you guys. Hope you've had a lovely time. We've run a couple of minutes over. Oops. Hopefully you've got a lot out of this, and we'd love to see you for the next one.
And hey, look, keep chucking your questions in the chat, because we will come to them over the next couple of days, and we'll do my best to respond to them on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.